Hello. All right, so I am going to share what pregnancy taught me, just about people, what pregnancy taught me about myself, what pregnancy taught me about God, um, and just, overall, my my pregnancy story, I guess, a baby story. So I was married, newlywed, for about 6 months, maybe 6 or 7 months, about 6 months or so before I got pregnant. So, me and my husband, newlyweds, enjoying each other as we could. And for me, I wanted a baby, but I don't think I had like a time frame or anything like that, but I was praying, and I guess I kind of wanted it soon, but I don't think I realized what soon meant. And so, I was before God, and, I was praying and, asking God for a baby. Other than that, I wasn't like overly actively trying, just the normal, newlywed, enjoying being newlywed type of, bedroom activity. But not trying to have a baby, but I was praying for it. And so I was praying for it for a little bit. And I think, after a little while, I kind of stopped praying about it. I wasn't too much stressed on it. And there was some type of conference or something that was going on. And we were, at this conference, and one of the prophetesses, she was praying for me. And this was, in front of everyone. She was praying for me, and she said to me, God is going to give you, or God is giving you, not verbatim, but she said, God is giving you what you have been praying for. God is answering your prayers. And, for me, it was, I don't want to say cliche, right? I never despised prophecies or anything like that, but I wasn't receiving it, understanding it as far as like those literal prayers. And she's like, God is giving you what you prayed for. He said, because, you came when you didn't want to come. You showed up when you didn't want to be there. You were obedient when you didn't want to be. And so he's blessing you with what you have prayed for. And so, again, it was just sounding like some things, not really trying to think or reflect on what have I been praying on. I just didn't think like that. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, God is gonna give me my heart's desire or something. I don't know. And so she prayed that, and within a couple of weeks, it was like a few short weeks later, that is when I took a test, and of course I was pregnant. So, being excited, and, first baby, with my new husband, he didn't have any kids, so his first baby as well. Excuse me, just, excited, and kind of, also just intrigued, like, okay, what is this going to be like? What's this journey going to be like? Now, going into the actual journey. So I went home for actually a wedding, and I think a wedding and a funeral. Lots of death in my family, unfortunately, especially around this time frame. So we went home for a wedding and a funeral, and this was right after I found out I was pregnant. And I remember I was just looking at my salad. I had only ordered a salad, and I was just looking at my salad, and the thought of it just disgusted me so bad. And so I gave my brother-in-law the chicken off of my salad, because I couldn't eat it. It was just like, it was just something off about that salad. Again, first baby, not even thinking about the pregnancy, but then, you know, talking it through and realizing with my husband, like, oh, this must be like morning sickness. So I was just a little bit uncomfortable. Mind you, this is within like the first month, the first like 4 weeks of pregnancy. So as time went on, morning sickness was extreme. And I would hear people talk about, you know, morning sickness. And of course, everyone around you was, you know, telling their stories. And so I didn't feel right. It was like this, it just doesn't feel right. I feel terrible all day, every day. And I don't mean like, oh, I just feel a little bit uncomfortable. It got to a place where there was absolutely nothing. When I say nothing, absolutely nothing that I could eat. I couldn't look at a cell phone. The thought of food, or if someone said something about a food, it would just completely make me sick. I was vomiting bile all the time. So I wasn't even putting out anything. I ended up losing about 15 pounds just within those first couple of weeks. And, you know, I got frail and I was weak and just exhausted. I would go to work, and at work, I would just kind of be out of it. I remember people would be talking to me. They would be, you know, giving me certain things to do, and I just was not there. All I could feel, think, was extreme nausea. It was basically like having food poisoning like 4 to 5 days out of the week. That's what I felt like every day. When I would brush my teeth, I would just start throwing up. You know, everything. It was just such an extreme struggle. When I would get home from work, I would just be in the bed with my legs propped up. My husband would try to cook things and, you know, bring me food, and I would just turn away at it. So it was extremely painful. I became depressed. I did not want to be pregnant anymore. None of it it just did not seem worth it. It was so miserable. Now, while all of this is going on, I'm still, you know, still going to work. At work, you know, the people are making their comments and, you know, acting as though I'm exaggerating. Still actively, you know, constantly at church, serving in ministry, and there, you know, being treated as though I'm exaggerating, eyes being rolled at me. You know, I was being told, you're not always sick. I was being told there's nothing wrong with you. You're just pregnant. And so, you know, I'm already depressed. I'm already extremely mentally and physically weak. I've lost all this weight. You know, my husband is pretty much completely taking care of me. He's having to pick up everything in the household and do all the laundry and the one to clean and all of that. And I am not mentally there. There's no like loving, fun conversation where there's no like quality time. It's just me constantly sick, depressed, and then, you know, being even more depressed because of the treatment that I was receiving from a lot of other people, you know, acting as though I was just being exaggerating my condition. So, there was a particular time that, you know, in my head, I was like, okay, God, am I crazy? Is this just how morning sickness works? Like, am I just not able to handle it? But there was a particular time, we went for a certain appointment checkup, and up until that time, you know, my appointments, they didn't really pay too much attention to me. And, you know, I didn't feel as though I was allowed to complain because I had been, and not saying that this is the fault of other people, but it's more so, you know, on me for taking on what other people were putting on me. But I had been kind of made to feel as though, you know, I'm faking things, or that I shouldn't complain and I just need to be quiet. And I went to this appointment, and there were these two young, blonde, cute little nurse and like PC, PA or yeah, whatever it's called, ladies. And they were just watching me as I'm like, sitting there, and I'm just coughing and, coughing up and throwing up bile right in the office. And they, were looking at my weight, and they're like, this is like, yeah, you lost quite a bit of weight in such a short time. And they told me about hyperemesis. And they were like, do you need help? And it was like I was almost afraid to say yes, like I want something that can help me. I didn't even know to ask or that I could ask. And, that's when they told me, hey, we can get you some medicine to help. And so the name of the medicine escapes me right now. I can't remember. But they got me a prescription. And I feel like Zofran, or I forget what it's called, but they got me a prescription, and I kid you not, I took this medicine every single day. I like the morning sickness, the hyperemesis was so bad. Like this was like my saving grace. But I took the medicine, and it definitely got better. Now, it was still extreme morning sickness, even with the medicine, but it made it to where I had some days where I could function a lot better. Then also there was an occurrence where I went to church, and this was not my church, but we were visiting another church that we spend a lot of time with, and their pastor told my pastors that they were being a bit like rough and mean with me, and told them how that pastor, how she had hyperemesis when she was pregnant with her youngest child. And hers was so bad that she was just bedridden completely. And so, I watched how God kind of came in and sent someone to like shut certain things down. And so, I started talking to her, and her and her husband were just telling me and my husband, just about how difficult it was, and that they understood what we were going through. And it was just that additional sense of like the validation and the peace. And then, as time kept going and progressing throughout the pregnancy, I was still dealing with a lot of the morning sickness, but I started having the craziest like fluid retention. I was so extremely swollen. I was so large and just completely uncomfortable. And I was constantly in pain every day. Now, I had what's called tylism, another thing that added on to the plate. Tylism, your mouth you accumulate just an insane amount of saliva. And when I say insane, I had to carry around a cup with me to spit, and I'm filling up cups of spit within like 10 minutes. So every, few words, I'm spitting into a cup. So I'm walking around, I'm super big and heavy, and everybody's like, what are you eating? And just throwing it out there as though I'm overeating and all of this. Meanwhile, still dealing with the morning sickness, still taking the medication, so I'm definitely not overeating. But I'm puffy. You could look at me and just see there's something wrong. It wasn't weight. This is like fluid retention. So I am still going to work every day. At work, people, are making their comments about the spit in the cup. Ew, oh, obviously it's gross for my husband. Just everywhere I go, wherever I'm at, whoever I'm around, they're just so disgusted and, saying all of these things about it. And so even more depressed. I just want to be isolated and left alone. I don't want to be in front of people or around people or have to constantly hear, how disgusting and gross I am. Because these are things people are actually, oh, that is so gross. Oh, you're so, ew. Can you like move somewhere else? And so these are things that I'm, like really just walking through in this pregnancy, still being sick. And it's just the thought like, I don't even want to be pregnant like anymore. And I just want this to be over. So in church, they still got me doing a bunch of stuff. They had me teach. I don't remember how many times it was, but I remember maybe like once or twice I had to teach a Bible study. I really didn't want to do it, but they're, oh, you're fine, you'll be okay. So I had to teach a Bible study while I'm up there embarrassed at my spit cup and just uncomfortable with all the eyes being on me while I'm spitting in the cup. And, I know the thoughts, or at least in my mind, it's the feeling of the thoughts of, ew, she's gross, and ew, that's nasty, and just an overall horrible look and horrible feel. So, dealing with all of that, go to the doctor, and of course, they haven't been too concerned with anything with me. But now all of a sudden they're concerned about my weight and what are you eating and are you doing this and all of these things with the weight. Wow, I'm not overeating. I am swollen with all of this fluid and I'm constantly in pain because all I could feel was body parts, pokings, non-stop. Like it was just a non-stop right in my chest, like in between my ribs. And I felt my baby in every single part of me. And this was every day, all day. I always felt my baby in every single part of me. So this is my entire pregnancy journey with my first baby. Now, there was a time where we were at church and, I'm just completely wiped and done and exhausted and depressed and just over the pregnancy at this point. This was towards the very end of the pregnancy. And there is a visiting church that comes. And there's a woman praying for people. She calls me up because she said the Lord gave her a word for me. And she prays for me. And then she says, God says you kind of care too much about what other people are saying and thinking. And he just wants you to rest. He just wants you to rest in him. And then it just broke. And the tears are streaming down my face because I said, okay, God, so God sees me and God has come for me, because when everyone around you is telling you the same thing and not really showing any compassion, you begin to take that on. Some of us do. You can begin to take that on as though you are wrong, as though, something is wrong with you. And saying that, I have to say again, there were people here and there that did show the compassion, just like the only two medical women, young women, that actually showed that compassion on me. My father, my mother. I would cry and talk to them about it. And, my parents, they weren't here with me. They were at home in a different state, but they were there for me. And my husband, my husband was going through it with me, actually. And so, things that I read was that when you're dealing with the hyperemesis and all of that, the husbands, they need that support system as well. They need someone to take, care for them. So, going back to when, the woman of God spoke that to me, and it just broke. And it broke the concerns, the issues, the care factor of what anybody else had to say, whether at work or, at church or just out in public where I would get the stares and the looks and the oohs at myself. So moving into the birth, when it was finally time for the birth. So I never went into labor on my own. And after hearing all of that, clearly I was so done with this pregnancy and I was just ecstatic, excited, ready to deliver this baby. Now, I went all the way as far as they will let you go. It's been so long now, I don't remember. I guess like right at 41 weeks or something like that. And I was completely done and over it. I remember they like changed my time to come to the hospital to be induced. And I think I just like broke and started crying. And my husband's just like, it's okay. It's okay. We're going to have the baby. And so we went, I don't remember if it was the afternoon or the evening, but we went to the hospital and they got me set up and I was not dilated at all. So they went ahead and, did the thing to induce me and everything, inserted whatever to induce me. And we were just playing the waiting game. Now, I sometimes, my whole life have, all kinds of like crazy medical things going on. And so one of them being like allergic reactions to all types of different medications. And so my mom, she was, when we, me, her, and my mother-in-law, when we talked about like giving birth and anesthesia and all of that, my mother-in-law had never used anesthesia with her children because they just came so fast. And then my mother, she had the concern for my reaction to it. And so, their thing was, hey, if you can, if you don't have to take the, anesthesia, then don't. And so, that was the goal, the plan. And so we, being induced, we went, I think about the first 12 or 13 hours with no anesthesia. And then they came and checked me and the nurse said I was 1 centimeter dilated. And I was like, I can't anymore. 1 centimeter dilated. And this is after 12 hours of contractions because I was induced. So go ahead and get the epidural. And the anesthesiologist, I remember at one point, I think I kind of misunderstood him, but he had said, if you start feeling something at a certain level of my body, if I started feeling something to, let them know. So I remember feeling something, so I went ahead and let them know. But I guess it was some type of misunderstanding. He meant like some type of extreme pain or something like that, where for me, I thought he just meant like if the numbness is gone. But I remember I notified them. Then he came up and he just kind of had an attitude, and basically he looked over at my grandmother and said, back in the day, we couldn't do all of this, right, mother? And my granny, she's looking like, who are you talking to? I just remember her kind of looking at him crazy, like, how dare you? And he didn't get the response he was expecting, because they all knew what I had been through throughout this pregnancy and what I had been through being in labor for as long as I was at that time. So, long story short, going through, they're checking me to see if I'm dilated. Now, once I'm getting close to like being ready to start pushing, one of the nurses comes and she starts feeling around and she makes this face, and I'll never forget it. It was just this face of like shock and concern. And then she says, I think he might be bigger than we expected. And, in my mind, I'm like, well, I could have told y'all he was bigger than the 6-7 pounds you all are trying to say. I know what I feel. But she says that. And I just noticed the concern on her face. So, turns out the cords wrapped around his neck. And he is a much larger baby than was expected. Just to get through the rest of it, we pushed for 4 hours. They did some check-in to see my level of force. They said, we can tell that you're pushing, with all your force. At this point, I'm falling asleep in between pushes because of the pure exhaustion. They asked me if I want help. I said yes. And they go ahead and do a forceps delivery. They do the forceps delivery, and I'm so exhausted, I just pass out after they finally pull him out. They pull out a limp baby. He just came out slumped like that. And he was also facing the wrong way. But they pull out a limp baby, and all of a sudden, like, everybody kind of gathers around and rushes him over to a table, and they're doing whatever they're doing. Then I see them kind of with my husband, like, trying to comfort him. And so I know something's wrong, but I don't fully understand, because at the same time, I'm passing out. That level of exhaustion. So turns out he did indeed have to be revived. He was 8 pounds, 8 ounces, and 22 inches long. Before I got pregnant, I was about 133 to 136 pounds, 5'1". And in the beginning of the pregnancy, I lost a good 15, somewhere like that, 15 pounds. By the time I went into labor, and me and my husband joked about it, the last weight that we did, I was, I think, 183 pounds. We always joke about it because my husband had even gained weight throughout that pregnancy, and he was 185 pounds at that time. And so my baby was huge. Everyone who saw him would say, that's a big baby. So it was a big thing, huge, very long. And all I could think was, that's why I felt so bad. That's why I felt him everywhere in my body. He had nowhere to go. I was completely exhausted at that labor. It was about, we were nearing right at 36 hours, right at 3 days, the entire labor from once we, got induced and got the process started to when he finally was out. I did not get to see him until I got to see him, I think, about 24 hours or so after he was born, because he had to stay in the NICU for a little bit. And so just, a pretty rough, traumatic labor. Then I had heard stories about, things that some of the people in the church, had been like seeing or dreaming and things like that about difficulty. And so that they all had been like praying those last couple of days. So from that experience, everything with it was traumatic. What I learned about myself was the ability to go through those very mentally difficult and physically difficult situations and maintain my sanity while, having to really be against the odds with all of the opposition that I had to receive from other people. But I thought it was normal. Like I thought that I was wrong. And so I had to learn to just be okay with me and trust myself and block out the noise. God was breaking me from that, over concern with all the other voices, the people pleasing, the fear of man, the concern of what man was going to say and what man was going to do. Also, what I learned about other people will put their own, situations, their own experiences onto you. They will project their own issues onto you. They will project whatever perception that they may already have of you at some point. That's going to come out, and you just have to be okay with letting that go and knowing that it's all them and it's not you. I learned to continue in love and forgiveness with people when they are clearly wrong and at fault and mistreat you. And to be okay knowing that people make mistakes and they may sometimes have good intentions or don't even realize, that they're mistreating you or making you feel a certain way. And that people are selfish. And we, a lot of times as people, don't consider how other people might be experiencing whatever they're experiencing, how they might receive what we say, what we do, and the impact that it will have on them. I learned about life is a process, and you're going to have to go through it. I learned from God, life is a process, and He is not going to pull you out of every situation. He's not always going to pull you out of suffering or pain. He may not even reduce the suffering and pain, but He will 100% be in it with you. He will give you some sort of comfort if you look unto Him through that suffering, through that difficulty, and through that pain. And He'll validate and vindicate you as well. Now, just to kind of close it up, after I had my first baby, my boy, I'm in the military, right? So in the Navy, you have what's called a sea duty and what's called a shore duty. Sea duty is where you're fully deployable. You go wherever, you are operational. Shore duty, that's where, you're not like out to sea and, deploying and doing all of that. And so for women in the Navy, you can, only have a baby if you are on shore duty. Now, when I say only, that is when you are supposed to, right? Because if you are on sea duty, you have to be pulled off of sea duty and sent to shore duty. So that creates issues of, now we got to find a replacement. Now we got to find somebody else to, do the job. And it just messes up the flow of things. So I had my baby while I was on shore duty. Then I was coming towards the end of my shore duty. My husband and I had, already scheduled the appointment to, get back on birth control. And now, we were young, dealing with young men, especially young men, all men, but especially young men in marriage. We were still early, in marriage and in our years. Keeping them off of you is very difficult, and they don't always want to wait. So what ends up happening, we had a whole appointment scheduled to go on our birth control. We missed the appointment because you have to abstain from, sex for a certain amount of time prior, just to ensure that you're not pregnant. Now, we rescheduled our appointment and everything. And one day we were at church and the pastor says to us, another baby is coming And we just look at each other like, oh my gosh, like, because no, we don't want another baby. The pregnancy, the labor, everything about our baby boy was so extremely traumatizing and difficult. We were good. We wasn't trying to have another baby, nothing. But he says another baby is coming. And, you know, again, he says a few other things. And we're just like, oh my gosh, you know, whatever. So we are, you know, scheduled to go and get the birth control. It maybe was a few short weeks, I think, after the pastor said that. And sure enough, pregnant again. Now I have to go and tell my job, my boss, that I'm pregnant again, and I'm in the middle of applying for jobs on sea duty. So now I can't go to sea duty. And it is highly frowned upon and looked down on when females do get pregnant while they're on sea duty, or like if they're about to go to sea duty. And of course they assume that, you know, you're just trying to get out of it. So I had to go tell my boss, and he says to me, were you even trying to do anything to not get pregnant? And I just looked at him and I was like, I don't know. And so that, you know, having that hanging over my head, I was before God, just like, God, another baby. And my husband is like the king of unbothered, like really don't care what nobody got to say about nothing. And he always says, like, to this day, okay, we have our family. And that one comment that man said meant absolutely nothing, and it doesn't mean anything now. And so, you know, I had to really get before God and keep seeing that same pattern of him trying to break me from the care. Because no matter what you do right, no matter what you do wrong, somebody's going to have something to say. But you got to do what you got to do. And every gift, every good, perfect gift is from God. Children we know are a blessing from God. And so while I was caught up in the, oh, I'm going to look crazy, and oh, this is how it's going to affect me at work, God was blessing me. The greatest blessing. When I went through that pregnancy, it was a little bit different that time. The hyperemesis wasn't as bad. Still had it, but it wasn't as bad. I still had the tylism, but I didn't care anymore. I learned how to say no. I'm not going to go to that service. No, I'm not going to speak here. I learned how to ignore them at work. I learned how to take off if I needed to. I learned how to tell the doctor how I feel. I need some time off. And then towards the end of that pregnancy, there was one of the girls in the church. She came, and at that time I remember I just didn't really want to be bothered with anybody. My attitude was different because I didn't care anymore. So there was nothing anyone could say to me, because I said, well, God already showed me last time. Stop tripping off these people. But the girl in church came to me, and she said to me that God had gave her a dream. And she said that God was saying that this pregnancy, you know, and this delivery wasn't going to be like the last one. No, actually, that's what the pastor had said to me. He said that God said that this baby is his gift to you. That's what the pastor said. But the girl, what she said to me, she said, I had a dream that you went into labor and it was just like really quick and easy. She said that it was like one push or two pushes, and then the baby just came out. And I just said, well, amen. But I didn't care what anybody was saying. I didn't care about no prophecies. I didn't care about no dreams, nothing. I just wanted everybody to leave me alone. So I go into labor with my baby girl. In this labor, I was in labor about 12 hours. I was induced again, but everything went smoothly. I was in labor for maybe 12 hours, and we pushed twice. She was facing the wrong way, just like my son, but we pushed twice. She came out after the second push. God is good. They, took her and, cleaned her up and laid her down on me. And she immediately starts trying to eat. She starts trying to eat. I nursed both of my babies. I breastfed both of my babies, but she immediately starts trying to eat. She's like sucking like newborn baby. It was the funniest thing. And it was just a very different, very beautiful, just beautiful experience that time around, because God is good. And so with that baby, with my little girl, that is my baby. She didn't want nobody to touch her, hold her, look at her, do anything with her if it wasn't me. And to this day, my baby girl is my baby girl. My baby girl love her mama. And so what I learned through that experience is that God is a God of redemption, and he can redeem your story, and he will bring joy after pain. What the word say? Beauty for ashes. He turns mourning into dancing, and he just will totally, come in and rectify situations that were wrong, even the situations that were always in his plan. He knows it all, but he will still come in and work all things out for your good. Amen.